I still remember the day it all began, as if the air itself wanted to burn that memory into me. It was the summer I turned 18 in Dallas, Texas. The sky was hot and heavy, the kind of day where the sun seemed angry at everything below it. I was standing on the porch of the small red brick house where I had grown up. That house had held all my childhood secrets, my tears, my laughter, and my dreams, and yet, in one cruel moment, it was no longer mine. My mom, Sarah, stood in the doorway. Her hand was tight around a single crumpled bill, $100. She didn't cry, didn't even flinch as she held it out to me. Her voice was flat, almost rehearsed, when she said, "You'll figure it out, Emily." There was no warmth in her tone, no love in her eyes. And then, before I could protest, before I could even take a full breath, she shoved the bill into my hand, stepped back into the house, and shut the door with a final, echoing click. The silence on the porch was louder than any storm. My fingers closed around that $100 as if holding onto it could keep me from falling apart. But deep down, I knew the truth. That was not a gift. That was the price of my exit. That was my mother's way of saying I was no longer her child. Through the window, I saw Lily, my younger sister, peeking out from behind the curtain. She was only 16, but already held the place I used to occupy in my mother's heart. She was smirking, almost triumphant, as if she had won a game we had never agreed to play. Mom wanted everything for her. The house, the love, the support, the inheritance, all of it. For me, just the street. I stood there for what felt like hours, staring at the door, hoping it would open, hoping maybe Mom would realize her mistake and call me back in. But the house stayed quiet, and I knew it wasn't my home anymore. With nothing but that wrinkled bill and the clothes on my back, I started walking. The first night, I didn't even know where to go. I wandered down the streets of Dallas, clutching that money like it was both my lifeline and my curse. I tried to tell myself I was free now, that maybe this was the beginning of some kind of adventure. But freedom without love is nothing more than exile, and adventure without direction is just stumbling in the dark. I used some of the money for food the next morning. A greasy burger and fries from a diner that tasted like salt and shame. I sat at a corner booth by myself, watching families eat together, children laughing as their parents wiped ketchup from their faces. I wanted to cry, but I forced the tears back down, swallowing them like stones. By the end of the first week, I had only $60 left. I spent nights in bus stations where the benches were hard and the air smelled of gasoline and loneliness. Sometimes I found myself under bridges, the roar of cars above drowning out my thoughts. On nights when I was lucky, a shelter had a bed. Most of the time, there wasn't room. The volunteers would shake their heads with pity, and I'd walk away pretending I wasn't about to break. I began to notice how quickly money vanished. Even when you live on almost nothing, the world finds ways to bleed you dry. A few dollars for food, a few more for a place to shower, and soon I was holding only scraps of what once seemed like a fortune. Within weeks, my $100 had disappeared, and I was left with nothing but the ache of hunger and the sting of betrayal. I scavenged what I could. Dumpster food didn't scare me after a while. I learned which places threw out sandwiches at the end of the day, which bakeries tossed stale bread, and which grocery stores locked their trash bins. I hated myself for digging through garbage, but hunger doesn't care about pride. My clothes began to wear thin. The jeans I left home tore at the knees, and the soles of my sneakers split open until I could feel the ground beneath my feet with every step. I walked miles every day, searching for safety, for hope, for someone to notice me. The city was full of people, but none of them saw me. I was invisible, just another shadow sliding along cracked sidewalks. Nights were the hardest. The cold crept in even during summer, and I would curl up wherever I could, hugging my arms around myself to stay warm. I listened to the sounds of the city, the sirens, the distant shouts, the barking dogs, and told myself I had to survive until morning. Each dawn felt like a small miracle. What hurt most was not the hunger or the cold, but the memory of that door closing. I replayed it in my mind over and over. My mother's face, so calm, so unmoved. My sister's smirk. the sound of the lock turning. I had been discarded, not because I had done something unforgivable, but because I was no longer wanted. That knowledge gnawed at me deeper than any empty stomach ever could. Still, somewhere inside me, a small flame refused to die. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was desperation, or maybe it was just stubbornness, but I told myself that one day, I would matter. One day, someone would see me. One day, I would not be the girl thrown away with only $100 bill to her name. For now, though, I was 18, homeless, and alone. And this was only the beginning. 10 years is a long time to be forgotten. When I think back now, it almost feels like I lived 100 different lives during those years, each one more fragile than the last. I left Dallas with nothing but that $100, and after it was gone, I drifted. First Houston, then Los Angeles, then Chicago, then New York, each city swallowing me up, chewing me, and spitting me back out onto its hard streets. I thought maybe a change of place would mean a change of luck, but I was wrong. No matter where I went, I was still the girl abandoned on the porch with nothing but a bill and a broken heart. In Houston, I learned my first real lesson about survival. I slept under a freeway bridge where the nights echoed with the rumble of cars and the laughter of people driving home to families I didn't have. There, I met John, an older man with a beard gone half gray who had lived on the streets for almost 20 years. One winter, when the temperature dropped to near freezing, he noticed me shivering against the concrete wall. Without a word, he handed me half of his blanket. I never forgot that moment. He didn't have much, almost nothing at all, but he shared what little he had. In a world that had given me nothing, John's act of kindness was a reminder that some people still carried humanity, even when the world had taken everything else away. When Houston became unbearable, I scraped together a bus ticket and headed west to Los Angeles. I thought maybe the bright lights, the ocean, and the endless possibilities of California would welcome me. Instead, I found sidewalks filled with people like me, hungry, tired, forgotten. I spent nights on Venice Beach, listening to the waves crash while my stomach growled. Sometimes, I walked down Hollywood Boulevard, staring at the stars embedded in the sidewalk and wondering if anyone who walked there had ever known what it felt like to be invisible. It was in Los Angeles that I met Maria. She was a thin woman in her 30s, with eyes that carried both sorrow and strength. One afternoon, I sat near a diner's back door, dizzy from hunger. Maria came out with a sandwich wrapped in paper. She looked at me for a long moment before splitting it in half and handing me a piece. "Eat," she said simply. I ate so fast that I nearly choked, tears streaming down my face, not just from the food, but from the kindness. She told me she had once been married, once had a house, but life had unraveled, and now she, too, called the streets home. We never became close friends, but in that brief exchange, I felt seen. Chicago was different. Colder, harsher, both in weather and in spirit. I arrived in the middle of winter, and the wind cut through my thin jacket like knives. I tried to get work at a diner, scrubbing floors for a few dollars, but the money never stretched far enough. Some nights, I stood near the docks, offering to carry heavy boxes for workers. A few would toss me a couple of dollars, and others would ignore me completely. There were moments I thought I might die there, frozen and forgotten. But somehow every time morning came, and so did I. By the time I reached New York, I had already lived nearly a decade this way. New York was louder, bigger, and somehow lonelier than any place I had ever been. The city swallowed people whole, and I was just another nameless face lost in the crowd. I tried everything to survive, singing on street corners, sweeping floors in small shops, even holding signs asking for work. I remember one day in particular. I was sitting near Central Park when a man in a suit walked by. He stopped, looked at me, and said, "You've got sad eyes." Then, to my surprise, he reached into his pocket, pulled out a $20 bill, and pressed it into my hand. For a moment, I couldn't even speak. It wasn't the money that made me cry. It was the fact that someone had looked at me and seen me. Not as trash, not as invisible, but as a human being with eyes worth noticing. Those years on the streets were cold, hungry, and unbearably lonely. Nights blurred into days, and days into weeks. I carried shame like a second skin, ashamed of my clothes, my smell, my hunger. But I also carried resilience. I discovered I could endure pain I had never thought possible. I learned to keep moving, to keep breathing, even when it seemed like the whole world had turned its back on me. Sometimes I wondered about Lily. I imagined her sitting comfortably in the house that had once been mine, my mother showering her with love, maybe paying for her college, buying her new clothes, and bragging to neighbors about her bright future. I wondered if they ever thought of me, if they told people I had simply disappeared, or if they erased me from their story. But even as bitterness tried to eat away at me, I clung to something deeper, the belief that my life was not finished. That flame inside me, the one that had sparked the day my mother shut the door, refused to die. Even in the darkest moments, it whispered to me that this was not the end. 10 years is a long time to be forgotten, yes. But it is also long enough to build a strength forged by fire, a strength no one can take away. I didn't know it then, but my story was only beginning, and the girl who had been thrown away would one day be wanted by the whole world. I will never forget that night in Philadelphia. The shelter was crowded, its air heavy with the smell of sweat, damp clothes, and the faint tang of soup from the evening meal. The walls were lined with cots, each one claimed by someone carrying their own private sorrow. I had been there for 3 days, grateful for a roof and a thin mattress, even if the noise never let me sleep more than an hour at a time. That evening, I sat in the corner, clutching a bowl of watery vegetable soup that I had almost begged for. My hands were shaking, not from the cold, but from exhaustion. The old television mounted high on the wall flickered in and out, its colors warped and sound muffled. Most of the time, no one paid attention to it. It was just background noise, news anchors talking about things that had nothing to do with us. But then the screen shifted. A picture appeared. At first, I thought it was someone else. A younger version of me, my hair brushed, my face clean, my eyes bright instead of tired. I froze. Then the words scrolled across the bottom of the screen in bold letters. $50 million reward for the address of Emily Walker. The spoon slipped from my hand and clattered against the metal bowl, soup splashing across my thin blanket. The room went silent. Every head turned, every eye focused on me. For a moment, I wished the floor would swallow me whole. My heart hammered in my chest. Why me? Why would anyone pay that kind of money for me, a woman who hadn't owned more than a pair of torn shoes in years? I had no job, no family who wanted me, and no place in the world. Yet there I was, my face on every television in America, tied to a reward so large it made the people around me whisper in shock. "Is that you?" A man muttered from the cot beside mine. I didn't answer. My throat was too tight. My hands trembled so badly, I had to grip the bowl, just to steady myself. Fear clawed at me. Would someone try to sell me out? $50 million was more money than anyone in that room could ever dream of. I wouldn't even blame them. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay on the cot, staring at the ceiling, replaying the image over and over in my mind. I thought about my mother, Sarah. I thought about Lily. I wondered if they had seen the news, if they were sitting in that same house, watching my face appear on their television. Did they laugh? Did they panic? Or did they simply change the channel? Questions raced through me. Who wanted me found? Why now? Why me? By morning, I was certain someone would turn me in. I kept expecting strangers to approach, to grab my arm, to drag me to whoever was paying. But instead, the unexpected happened. The shelter director, a tired but kind woman named Melissa, approached me at breakfast. "Emily," she said quietly, "there's someone on the phone for you." I blinked at her, confused. No one ever called me. No one even knew where I was. My heart pounded as I followed her to the office, where an old rotary phone sat on a desk. I picked up the receiver with trembling hands. "Hello." My voice cracked. "Emily Walker?" a man's voice asked, steady and professional. "Yes," I whispered. "My name is David Harris. I'm an attorney. I represent Richard Walker." He paused, as if giving me a chance to recognize the name. I didn't. Who? I asked, my confusion raw. Richard Walker, he repeated. He's a businessman. A billionaire. He lives in New York City. And he's your father. The room tilted. For a moment, I thought I might faint. My father? No, my father was gone. He had left when I was too young to remember. At least, that's what Mom always told me. You've made a mistake, I said quickly, panic rising in my chest. My father's not alive. I don't even know. Emily, David interrupted gently. I know this is hard to believe, but your life is not what you think it is. When you were born, there was a mistake at the hospital. You were switched with another baby. That baby didn't survive, but the hospital staff never told Richard. They told him his daughter had died at birth. He mourned you for years. He thought you were gone forever. I gripped the phone so tightly that my knuckles turned white. My thoughts spun in every direction. Could this be true? Was this some kind of cruel scam? But then I remembered the television, the reward, the way my picture had appeared everywhere. People don't put $50 million on the line for a lie. What about the woman who raised me? I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. David hesitated. She was not your biological mother. I can't say why she did what she did, but the truth is simple. You are Richard Walker's daughter, and he wants to see you. I felt sick. My mind shot back to Sarah, to the day she shoved that $100 bill into my hand and slammed the door in my face. To the years I spent hungry, cold, and alone. To the endless nights I wondered if I mattered at all. And now, suddenly, I was supposed to believe I wasn't her daughter at all. I had belonged to someone else all along, someone powerful, someone who wanted me back. David's voice broke through my storm of thoughts. Emily, Richard has been searching for you for years. He's ready to explain everything. He will send a car for you today if you're willing. My legs felt like they might give out. I sat down hard on the chair beside the desk, the phone pressed to my ear. My stomach churned with fear, hope, and disbelief all tangled together. A part of me wanted to scream that it wasn't true, that it couldn't be true. Another part of me, a deeper, quieter part, whispered that this was why I had survived. That this was the moment I had been waiting for through every hungry night, every tear, every lonely dawn. I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. The weight of 10 years of pain sat heavily on me. But somewhere deep inside, I knew my life had just changed forever. When I finally spoke, my voice trembled. Tell him I'll come. The car that took me from Philadelphia to New York felt like it belonged in a movie, not in my life. Black leather seats, tinted windows, the faint smell of polish and money. I sat there in silence, my fingers twisting nervously in my lap as the city lights blurred past. Every mile brought me closer to a man I had never met but who, somehow, was my father. When the car finally pulled up to the mansion in Manhattan, I could barely breathe. The iron gates opened with a slow, deliberate creak, revealing a long driveway lined with trimmed hedges and glowing lanterns. The house itself was nothing like the small brick home in Dallas where I had grown up. This was not a house, it was a palace. Marble steps led to towering double doors. Windows stretched high, glittering with warm golden light. Inside, I could see chandeliers sparkling like stars brought down to earth. The driver opened my door, and I stepped out on shaky legs. My sneakers were scuffed, my jacket threadbare, and I felt small and out of place against the grandness of it all. For a moment, I considered running. But then the doors opened, and there he was. Richard Walker, my father. His hair was gray, his suit tailored, his presence commanding. But when his eyes found me, they softened. His lips trembled as if he had rehearsed this moment for years, but still didn't know how to begin. Then, in a voice cracked with emotion, he whispered, "Emily, my daughter." I froze. The word daughter hit me harder than anything ever had. For so long, I had been nobody, an outcast, a forgotten face. And now, in this moment, I was someone. His daughter. He stepped forward, slowly, as though afraid I might vanish if he moved too quickly. Then his arms were around me, warm and firm. pulling me into an embrace I hadn't felt in a decade. For the first time since I was 18, I felt safe. My tears soaked his jacket, and I didn't care. He whispered promises into my hair, that he would never let me go again, that he would make up for the years lost, that I would finally have the life I deserved. Inside the mansion, my eyes couldn't take it all in. The marble floors gleamed. The ceiling soared, painted with murals like the ones I had only seen in books. Paintings hung on the walls, each one worth more than anything I had ever owned. A grand staircase curved upward, its railing carved like lace out of wood and gold. Staff members bowed their heads politely as I passed, but I couldn't look at them. I was too busy trying to believe this wasn't all a dream. Richard led me into a study lined with bookshelves. The scent of leather and old paper filled the room. He poured me water into a glass that sparkled like crystal and sat across from me. For the next hour, he told me everything. He told me about the day I was born, how he had paced the hospital hallways, nervous and eager, how a nurse came to him with solemn eyes and told him his baby girl had died, how he had held a small blanket that was supposed to be mine, crying until there were no tears left. He told me how he buried that grief deep inside him, burying himself in business and money as a way to forget the hole in his heart. Years later, whispers had reached him, rumors, inconsistencies in the hospital's records, a photograph that surfaced by accident. He had begun searching, quietly, carefully, never giving up. When my picture finally appeared, when he realized the truth, that I had been alive all along, he vowed he would stop at nothing to find me. I listened, my heart torn between joy and anger. Joy that I had a father who wanted me, who had spent years looking for me. Anger that I had spent 10 years cold, hungry and unloved, while the truth had been locked away by lies. "Why didn't you find me sooner?" I asked, finally, my voice trembling. He looked at me with eyes full of regret. "I tried, Emily. God knows I tried. But they hid you well. And I trusted people I should not have trusted. If I could take back every year you suffered, I would. I can only promise you this. From today forward, you will never be alone again." That night, I slept in a bed bigger than any room I had ever stayed in. The sheets were soft, the pillows thick, and for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of the dark. But sleep did not come easily. My mind replayed the faces of those who had shared my journey, the strangers who had given me blankets, sandwiches, and kind words. I thought of the shelters, the alleys, the park benches that had been my home. I thought of John and Maria, whose small acts of compassion had kept me alive. And then I thought of Sarah, the woman who had raised me, not as a mother, but as a jailer. The woman who had pushed me out the door with $100 bill, choosing Lily over me. What had she known? Did she know I wasn't her child? Did she know the truth when she cast me out? Or had she simply wanted me gone so her favorite daughter could have everything? Lily, too, haunted my thoughts. Was she still living in that small Dallas house, believing she was the chosen one? Did she know that her entire life had been built on a lie? I cried that night, but not just for the pain. I cried for the strange, impossible truth of it all. For the first time, I wasn't just a lost soul on the streets. I was Emily Walker, the daughter of a billionaire. But more than the wealth, more than the mansions or the businesses, I had something I hadn't dared hope for in years, a family. The future stretched before me like a road newly paved. My father spoke of estates in California, of businesses in America and Europe, of opportunities one couldn't even imagine. But what I held on to was not the promise of wealth. It was the promise of belonging. The knowledge that, after 10 long years of being invisible, I had been found. As dawn crept through the mansion windows, painting the room in gold, I whispered to myself, "I am Emily Walker." For 10 years, I was homeless, forgotten, and broken. But now, I am the daughter of a billionaire. Not because of money, but because at last I know who I am.